Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Crypt Finder. So, tonight I'm going to turn a spotlight on one of the landmark made for TV horror movies of all time. From 1972, it is The Night Stalker. This little gem of a movie was produced by Dan Curtis, and Curtis had already achieved a lot of fame because he helped create the ABC TV soap opera Dark Shadows, which had tons of supernatural elements in it. This movie was directed by John Llewellyn Moxey, and it also features just a riveting performance by Darren McGavin as Carl Kolchak. He's the intrepid reporter who stumbles upon this chilling mystery in Las Vegas. This is one of the seminal classics of the made-for-TV movie genre, and I'm going to do a little bit exactly like the thing that I did with Trilogy of Terror. I'm going to approach this as if there are people out there, you've never heard of it, never seen it, know nothing about it whatsoever, because this film does have a huge fan base. There are lots of channels that go into a lot of discussion about The Night Stalker, and well, for good reason, it is a classic, but I'm going to approach it in such a way as to just sort of like give you a little bit here and there to try to entice you to actually go and watch this film. There's something really magical about this film. It's the tight pacing, it is the seedy atmosphere of early 70s Vegas, it is the lone reporter sort of pitted against his editor, up against all the government officials who are trying to suppress the story. There's a string of horrible murders, and then there's this massive manhunt for a guy who might just be a real live vampire. What unfolds is a very suspenseful and taut thriller. It captivated audiences then, it still does now. It became a touchstone for TV horror for good reason. Based on the unpublished novel by Jeff Rice, The Night Stalker actually features a screenplay by Richard Matheson, and I've talked about Richard Matheson so much it feels like in every single episode that I've done. So I won't go into all of his accomplishments. Just know he was a master storyteller, and here this is a master class in suspense. He actually transforms sort of a straightforward vampire story into a gripping noir narrative that really helps keep the viewers right on the edge of their seats. Jeff Rice's original manuscript was finally published and marketed, by the way, and so if you happen to find a copy, please pick it up. It's a very, very good book. It's definitely worth your time to read it. I also have to mention, though, that there's another book called Progeny of the Adder. This is by Leslie H. Whitten, and this was actually published way before that in 1965. Also an excellent book that, yeah, I feel like you should check out as well. Stories are very, very similar. Progeny of the Adder is about a Washington, D.C. homicide detective who stumbles across a series of murders. There's bloodless corpses. It seems like a vampire is doing the killing. So, yeah, very, very similar. And apparently, I know I read over the years that Whitten was encouraged to sue not only Jeff Rice, but also ABC for The Night Stalker. He just really didn't feel like it was worth it. So in this film, wow, Darren McGavin, he gives such an unforgettable performance as Carl Kolchak. He's the washed-up big city newspaper reporter. He's trying to make a name for himself in the neon-lit streets of Las Vegas. And his portrayal of this sort of grizzled, determined reporter, it brings depth to the character. There's a lot of intentional humor in there as well that really just makes Kolchak such a great character. You're rooting for the guy all the way through the film. McGavin's chemistry with the material really, really helps here. He helps keep this as a very grounded story, even with all of these supernatural elements that are going on. And McGavin was already known to TV viewers because he had been in Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer. He had also been in the TV series Riverboat. And of course, he would be very well known as the father, just really called, the old man in A Christmas Story from 1983. Also in the cast, you have Simon Oakland. He's Kolchak's editor, Tony Vincenzo, and the combustible relationship between these two characters, it is just dynamic when it's on screen. Simon Oakland was well known on TV and also on the silver screen, but horror fans will remember him very well. He's the psychiatrist who shows up at the end of Psycho to sort of give all of the exposition and explain why this happened. For movie audiences of 1960, they probably needed this kind of clear-cut explanation. Today, most people feel like that scene is kind of not really needed as much, but yeah, but you will certainly remember him from that movie. You also have Claude Akins as Sheriff Butcher. Akins he was in From Here to Eternity, The Caine Mutiny, Rio Bravo, a ton of appearances in TV westerns. You have Carol Lyndley also showing up here. She plays Gail Foster. She's a companion of Carl Kolchak's. Remember, this was 1972. Any sort of reference to prostitution or paid escorts, that was a big no-no. But I think if you read between the lines a little bit here in her performance, you can kind of get that, yeah, she's pretty much a paid escort. Lyndley was best known for her roles in Return to Peyton Place and also The Poseidon Adventure. But I actually really enjoyed her in two other genre films that don't really get talked about all that much. One from 1965 is Otto Preminger's film Bunny Lake is Missing, and the other one is from 1967. It's a thriller called The Shuttered Room. You also have a host of just solid acting veterans filling out this very impressive cast. You've got Ralph Meeker, Charles McGraw. You have Kent Smith, Elijah Cook Jr. shows up in a cameo, and you also have Larry Linville in here as well. And this is right on the cusp of him joining MASH, playing the incomparable Major Frank Burns for 5 seasons. But I cannot talk about any of the cast without, of course, discussing the villain, Barry Atwater. His portrayal of the vampire, Janos Skorzeny, is quite memorable. Atwater never utters a word of dialogue throughout the film. We know the character can speak because the used car salesman talks about, like, oh, the red eyes and the voice. That's enough to keep a guy from working nights. So yes, we know that he can speak, but he never utters a word of dialogue throughout this film. Instead, he just kind of relies solely on his physical presence and the menacing demeanor to convey the terror of his character. This silent portrayal adds to the film's eerie atmosphere. It makes Skorzeny a very memorable antagonist. Since talking, it's such a human thing, of course. It's how we all communicate to each other. So it is sort of a nice, subtle nod to that maybe he's devolved so far away from humanity that he only really talks if he has to. Atwater had a variety of appearances on film and TV, but his turn on the Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, is really outstanding. And he also played Surak. He was the father of Vulcan philosophy in the original Star Trek series. Here's a scene that's going to display just how good he is at what he's doing. So in this particular scene, while changing out a victim's IV bag so he can maintain a steady supply of blood via a very unwilling donor, while Kolchak is hidden in the closet watching on, he steps out, he closes his eyes with this very slight flutter, and then he gives that very subtle turn. Did you catch it? Yeah. He knows that Kolchak is in there because he can smell him. The film's score is by Robert Cobert. You're certainly going to see some of the same motifs that he used in Dark Shadows, but the music is actually very chilling and works really quite well. It's almost as if there's kind of a connection between the vampire lore of the soap opera and its resident vampire Barnabas Collins, and then the modern day terror here in the Night Stalker. Both are creatures from another time. They're sort of inserted into a modern day culture trying to blend in. This subtle nod sort of helps bridge the gap a little bit between these two vampire stories. You also have Kolchak's narration at the beginning and the end of the film, which it immediately pulls viewers into this story. That sort of direct address and the framing of the narrative creates a sense of, I don't know, I guess immediacy, involvement, like making the audience feel like they're co-conspirators in seeking and finding the truth and uncovering the origins of these murders. Despite minimal promotion, The Night Stalker actually achieved unprecedented success. garnishing the highest ratings for a television movie up to that point in time. Its blend of suspense and horror and strong performances really captured the audience's imaginations. It just set a new standard for what TV horror could be. The film's success ultimately led to a sequel, The Night Strangler from 1973. Yes, it's an okay movie. It's fine. It is worth your time, and yes, you should check it out. It's sort of the basic formula, maybe a little bit thinner. It lacks some of the amazing special effects. I mean, you can really feel the makeup effects. You have a sense of where they were going. They just didn't quite get there. And plus, those effects that so much of the movie is hinging on, it only shows up in the last couple minutes of the movie, and it's just not as compelling as it could have been. Richard Matheson and William F. Nolan completed a script for a third made-for-TV movie that would have been called The Night Killers, but ultimately that kind of got axed. And instead, what happened was ABC opted for the short-lived TV series Kolchak, The Night Stalker. It only ran for one season from 1974 to 1975, but it was a very memorable show for those of us who watched it. Not all of the episodes were jaw-dropping or anything. Personally, I loved the Spanish Moss murders, which was genuinely very scary at times. Also, Horror in the Heights, Chopper, the Trevi Collection was a real favorite of mine, but that's mainly because Laura Parker happened to star in that particular episode. So seeing her as the witch, Angelique, in Dark Shadows, and then seeing her as a witch here, I don't know, it was just an inspired bit of casting that I appreciated. Okay, secretly, I really loved all of the episodes in that one season that we had, and this series certainly inspired Chris Carter in his later creation of The X-Files. Kolchak's character became this sort of archetype for the investigative reporter confronting supernatural horrors every week, ultimately influencing later works in the genre. So, The Night Stalker is often credited with revitalizing the made-for-TV horror movie genre, sort of becoming, I guess, a blueprint for how future films would go from there. The idea of taking some mystery and building in the suspense and some of the horror and supernatural elements, that was something that really you saw that beginning to happen with many other films from there. But it certainly ensured this movie's place in the pantheon of classic TV horror. If you have not experienced The Night Stalker, this is not a situation where I'd say, yeah, it's well worth your time to go take a look and you should check it out. No, no, no. It is required viewing. The film's combination of a very compelling story. You've got excellent performances. You have atmospheric tension, just ultimately making this a standout entry in the world of made-for-TV horror. So I hope if you haven't seen it, yeah, you got to go check it out right now. Right now. What are you waiting for? Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you will be notified whenever I drop a new video. And as always, everyone, stay curious and stay scared.
Watch out, you great big wonderful big apple. Kolchak's coming back.